Well, Elegoo upset a lot of people, didn't they? It probably wasn't a smart idea allowing the Centauri Carbon 2 to be revealed before making it clear that a colour-changing element was still coming to the original CC as promised, and based on the footage they've shared on socials, it is at some point. But don't worry, dear Elegoo fan, because this isn't really even a Centauri Carbon 2, it's more of a 1.5. It's the same machine again with a few improvements, a few enhanced features, a few things moved about, and it does move the product line forward. But I think for many a 3D printing enthusiast, the second you see their side-mounted implementation of colour changing rather than a separate modular and expandable box, in a world where tool changers and multiple nozzles are 3D printing's next top model, I'm sure many of us are thinking, yeah, but that's not the direction we hoped you'd go. Nevertheless, this is still Elegoo doing what they've done best for years now, stripping expensive technology back to little more than the components necessary and delivering a decent workhorse at a price point that's hard to ignore. And when it comes down to it, whilst colour changing still looks impressive, most of us abandon it the second we realise how much waste is involved anyway. Oh yeah, sorry, before we move on, hi, I'm Ross and this is Fohammer Videos. So let's get through this, and up front I need to say what you're all going to see throughout, and what is actually quite typical of the brand over the last few years. These are more budget conscious machines, and here I don't mean that in a bad way. It arrives in a basic cardboard box, lift it out by the bag and unwrap it. There is some building to do, a little more than other enclosed Core XY printers nowadays, but nothing is particularly difficult. For the most part, this is a simple case of remove all the foam packaging and unbolt the bed, but you also need to attach the screen on the bottom, and even the waste chute on mine came as a separate part that needs mounting in. Now, for a basic printer, that would be it, and whilst I don't have confirmation, I think it's safe for us to assume that there will be a version of the Centauri Carbon 2 coming out which doesn't have this 4-colour add-on included. It'd be daft not to when there's so many other changes here. Just something on external, so going back to the earlier Centauri Carbon review, the right side of the chassis there had a built-in recess to mount a filament reel holder and a screw socket for the runout sensor. So on this new model, I'm not sure where those elements are going to move to, and I'm curious as to whether Elegoo expect to sell a basic version of the Centauri Carbon 2 with the ability to upgrade to a colour changer later. This might actually be it, colour changer or nothing. We'll see before long, and I think it'll be fine, but these are things I wish I knew at the start of a new generation, and if they do release another model, maybe that's going to be another video for me. Anyway, back to this one. Adding the material change module takes a bit more building time. You need to attach the brackets to the side of the machine and then slide in the filament wheels. I'll cover these in more detail later, but these are numbered, and whilst it doesn't functionally matter where each one goes, it's probably best to put these in the places assigned with the stickers on the chassis because they marry up to the order of what the buffer on top knows them to be. Anyway, you then need to attach this buffer bracket onto the top, then attach the buffer itself to that bracket, which then connects to the machine via a 4-pin cable. And you also need to manually attach the 4-way hub in the top of the hot end before connecting the PTFE tubes from the buffer and clipping them together. And then finally, we put on the big plastic lid, which is, yeah, more of a hat. And yes, this feels a bit cheap and flimsy, but aside from taking up some extra vertical space, I've had no issues with it, and it does help to keep the noise down a bit. But that's your fully constructed machine. Now externally, other than the hat, this is near identical to the original Centauri Carbon, with only a few things moved about, which is why I said in the intro, this is more of a 1.5 with a few upgrades, rather than what other brands do in terms of changes where they make more of a whole new machine with a new silhouette and new footprint. Almost everything here is where it was before. The power socket and rocker switch is on the back, but the waste chute is now directly above it. This time the dual fan outlets are a singular fan, which actually has one of the best Centauri Carbon upgrades internally, a vent flap which opens for materials that need cooler print environments like PLA, and closes to keep the heat in the chamber for materials like ABS. And we'll come back to the results of this in print quality later, but spoiler alert, Very good. But just to point out, and this is what led me to infer there's going to be a simple version coming, this machine still has an opening at the top for a PTFE tube when not using the material changer. Now it would have been nice to see Elegoo plug this up at least, maybe they have on the retail version, but even if not, I expect someone will make a printable plug before long. And as I said before, the right side no longer has the socket for the reel holder or runout sensor in place of these 4 new reel mounts, so we'll see what they do there if they make a basic version. Now on the front, this is identical to what we had before. We've got the USB socket right in the center and the screen mounted to the bottom right corner, but this is fixed, not rotatable. And we also have a glass front door, and a lot of people have been asking me this on more reviews I do, so I'll answer it here. No, it doesn't open much beyond 90 degrees, maybe 100, 110. It doesn't bother me, but yes, I can see how near a 180 all the way open would be more handy. Now inside we've got the hot end unit. The nozzle has been upgraded so you can now push it up to 350 degrees. But as always, I'm more interested in the practical features of this module. And honestly, as a user, this is and has always been my least favourite part of the Centauri carbon machines. The cover easily comes off, but the nozzle itself is rather legacy in that replacement still relies on unscrewing the whole nozzle assembly, including the heatsink, or manually heating it up and then unscrewing and rescrewing in a new nozzle. But the hardest part is if you do get a clog, it's near enough a full hot end teardown to reach the extruder mechanics, which is proper frustrating if it happens. Now I'm saying that as of yet I haven't experienced a clog on either of the Centauri carbon machines, and this one alone has done over 700 hours. But the fact is, clogs can and do happen, and when they do, it's a pain in the arse to solve it here. Now, the Z mechanism operates on 3 lead screws, each with a guide bar. Unfortunately though, accessing the rear lead screw for relubrication isn't great because it's now behind an inner plastic enclosure, something that wasn't present on the original carbon. So because this new one has an internal carbon filter in front of the fan on the right hand side, all of that plastic housing gets in the way of the screw. Another extra is the auxiliary part cooling fan mounted to the left hand side of the inner chamber. And as for the build plate, this is a dual-sided spring steel plate which actually has 2 sides. It has a generally rough PEI side used for a variety of materials, with the slightly less rough B side specifically for PLA. But honestly, I just stuck with the PEI side for all of my prints and it was absolutely fine. Oh, and the build volume is once again 256mm cubed, directly copying a certain other brand on the market. Considering the amount of designs out there nowadays on the likes of MakerWorld with that build size in mind, this means it's a solid machine out of the box because it's directly compatible with most of the pre-designed models already available. The only other thing I want to mention in the internals right now is a small frustration, but it is practically annoying. And this is because the internal base of the machine is lower than the bottom of the door, so it's slightly harder to remove debris that will inevitably get dropped in here, which is a little bit extra bothersome due to the large gaps around the guide rods where things can fall inside the machine. Again though, someone will probably make a printable cover before long. But I've got to mention it because scooping crap out of the base rather than slide it out is a valid difference that doesn't exist now on a few other Core XY machines. Before we come on to colour changing, I'm getting old and I need to sit down. And that brings me perfectly to this quick sponsored break. This section is sponsored by Boolies, and I want to talk briefly about the Master Rex chair, which you're seeing me build here. Assembly is straightforward and sensible. Nothing fights you, nothing feels flimsy while you're putting it together, and once it's built, the whole thing feels solid rather than creaky or hollow. The metal base and frame give it a reassuring bit of weight, and everything lines up without needing to force parts into place. Once it's set up, what stands out is how adjustable it is in ways you'll actually notice. The lumbar support moves up and down so you can actually line it up with your back properly. The seat is wide with rounded edges so you're not perched on the edge of it. And the armrests adjust in ways that will actually get your arms sitting naturally instead of shrugged up or stretched forward. It reclines smoothly, and yes, it has a built-in leg rest. That's not something I use often when working, but when you lean back between jobs or you're just watching something, it's genuinely comfortable and easy to use. Material-wise, you can choose between their Ultraflex PU or water repellent fabric in a variety of colours. I went with fabric because it's more breathable for long desk sessions, and it feels durable without being stiff or plasticky. Overall, this feels like a chair designed to be used every day rather than just photographed for a product page. It's comfortable, adjustable, and well put together. Because I did it myself. No, I'm kidding. If you want to check it out, there's an affiliate link in the description, and any current offers or coupon codes will be listed there as well. And yes, I mostly like it because boolies rhymes with ghoulies. And apparently I'm still 12 years old. Now, this colour changer, or canvas as they call it, I'm not going to call it that. As far as material changes go, I just don't think this is the direction people want to see. It feels legacy, budget. External enclosed boxes that help keep filament dry, or sometimes even actively dry it, are much more versatile and expandable tools, which are far easier to add to a device later down the line, and again, you can normally daisy chain them and multiply them. Just sticking 4 reels on the side in the open air when filament is very susceptible to ambient humidity isn't the way to go. But then, at the same time, I've got to remember I've also said for a long while now that even though colour changes exist, just how much material a multicolour print wastes and how messy that waste can be, the feature you've paid for here often gets relegated to no more than, ooh, that was cool the first time you use it, but never again. So honestly, as I've said before, the bigger value in these, or any of them, is the small convenience of not having to manually heat the nozzle and then hand push filament to and through it, and then the reverse every time you want to change it. So the value here long term, I think, is more that. And I actually reviewed another brand recently who have an external dual reel autoloader, which I actually think serves more value to people than this. But on the flip side, if you do want it, this works. Just be aware you can only use filaments where the reels have an inner diameter of about 52 to 58 millimeters, otherwise they either won't mount on the pegs or they'll fall off. And Elegoo now has filament with RFID tags, and they're apparently making their own open RFID format so that other brands can get on board with this, as I found out at Formnext last year. Check out that video for more. Okay, not more. Well, actually, it's the same info, but please watch more of my videos. Now, this isn't quite as automated as other machines where you just put the reel on and it automatically detects it. What you actually do is scan the RFID against the reader on the side of the buffer, and then you get a pop-up on the UI which asks you which slot you're mounting it to. So it is straightforward. Now, just before we go on to print quality, a couple of quick notes about software. The UI of the machine is pretty much what we've had before and is now rather standard across most printers. They have, of course, added the menu for filament loading, which is handy because setting your filament type and colour here then syncs back to the slicer. But speaking of, this is Elegoo's version of Orca. It's basic, but it also doesn't try and reinvent the wheel. And there are some elements that have now become common of printers using this same firmware and slicer combo, such as the simple ability to cancel part of a print mid-print. I actually had one of several parts fail and come away from the bed during one of my earlier prints, and rather than just cancel that item allowing the rest to continue, I only had the option to either cancel the entire print or just allow the printer to extrude a spaghetti-like mess in the area of that part until that small piece was complete. So I chose that one, and there was no sign of the printer detecting this spaghetti and pausing. Another thing I noticed with this machine is that print time estimates were wildly off. I printed a lot of multicolour parts on this machine, and jobs with an estimate of, say, just over a day ended up taking more than 2. So this is something they really need to get a hold of and dial in. Now, the machine has a camera which generates time lapses, but getting these off the device is a more arduous process of exporting them to a USB drive rather than doing it remotely in the slicer. And it's also quite a low resolution camera, so your resulting time lapses are at a pretty poor quality of 640 by 360. But this brings me on to the biggest thing Elegoo lacks: a phone app for basic remote monitoring. Now, Elegoo now have the Matrix app, but so far this is only for their resin printers, and you can access the printer's UI via a web browser by just typing in the IP address, but to monitor this outside of your own home, yeah, you need to do some local network fiddling on your router. But when it comes to overall print quality, this has been solid. In fact, it's been one of the best printing experiences out of the box that I've ever had. My first benchy print was absolutely fine, first layer test was near perfect, with only a small sign of under extrusion in the front right corner. Now, yes, this isn't perfect, I said near perfect, but this is certainly above par for most FDM printers that I've tested. And when it comes to ABS, I ran off a full 3D print test that showed decent surface quality, all parts printed first time, bridging was clean, and even the overhang test outperformed my Prusa Core 1L, which is a review I'll have out shortly after this one. Subscribe so you don't miss that. Now, this machine has no internal heater. The chamber heats passively using heat from the build plate. And I must admit, the one thing I wish it did was at least wait and let the chamber warm to temp before starting a print. But for the most part, this works, and it works well. Now, I had to wait a few days for Elegoo to send me some filament, as they asked me to do a large project on this and supplied the materials for it. So I used up the ends of several rolls I had printing a Final Fantasy VII Buster Sword, and I told the printer that all the rolls I loaded were the same colour when printing this, so when one ran out, it would just move on to the next. And it had absolutely no issue moving from one to the next every single time I had a run out on all 4 reels. To be honest, I wasn't even going to show this model, it was just something I was doing for myself. But I wanted to bring it up because if there's anybody watching who could please take this model and remix it with 2 bore holes through the full length of the blade so I can add some long plastic rods for stability, I'd be eternally grateful and thank you in a future video when I reprint it. A link to this model will be in the comments if anyone can help me with that. Also, while I'm asking for favours, what do people in the UK use for plastic welding PLA? Because I can't get my hands on that gloop stuff anywhere at a reasonable price. Anyway, yeah, so Elegoo asked me to print a large multicolour print for this video and said they'd provide me with the filament to deliver it. I got the printer for free, they haven't paid me to make the video. Printer, filament for free, that's how I do all my reviews. All the words I'm saying are my own. They've had no oversight over this video, but they wanted me to show off colour printing because this is their first multicolour printer. So I printed 2 of these frost axes from the Eternal Forge's last campaign. This took over a week, nearly 2 weeks, with thousands of colour changes. And one part of it even has 5 colours. Now, in order to do this, I added a pause in the job to do a swap out, but unfortunately, and I tested this a few times, the printer seems to completely ignore that instruction in the G-code. But because of the gap between these different colours, I had more than enough time to do a manual swap between the blue finishing for the rune block and the start of the red gem. Now, on these prints, the dimensions were a little expanded. I actually struggled to screw these parts without lubrication. Yeah, giggity giggity. But anyway, once I added some grease, they did connect up. But the main point is, during printing, I had no issues. This machine, like the Centauri Carbon before it, performed like an absolute workhorse for hundreds of hours. But I do think this waste also shows off the earlier point I made about colour changing, because I had to move this around my room during use as I had other projects on the go, and yeah, I think I'm going to be picking out bits of filament from under my cupboard for months to come. I did try printing a small waist model, but after my first print I realised this was way too small for the task I was undertaking, so I just took it off. But again, someone will probably have a larger solution available before long, if not already, and I just missed it. But let's conclude on the printer. So as always in my reviews, I like to just break it down straight for you and get to the point. This is a budget printer when you look at the price versus the competition for the features you get. And you've seen me sour on cheap copy brands before, but I think this one is an example of how to do it right. Even in the resin space, Elegoo have a track record of understanding the key elements we want as customers and delivering them at the most affordable and competitive price points possible. And they do that by stripping things back. No glass lid, money saved. The screen doesn't rotate, money saved. Lower resolution camera, money saved. No app, no STL storefront when better ones already exist. Money saved. And that saving is passed on to you. But yeah, there is a cost there because there are still some software elements that exist on other machines, like the ability to cancel parts or add pauses, and hardware elements that are a bit outdated, like long nozzle swaps and bad extruder gear access. But this then just comes down to your choice, and at least this time, it's a clear choice. You know you're saving money when you buy this machine. You get issues with all printers, not just mid-tier brands. But here, Elegoo, instead of pretending to be just like the best printers on the market, but actually offering a poorer quality experience with only a small relative saving like some brands, savings which will probably cost you more in the long run, and you know the brands, the ones I mean, the ones that embody that meme of your mum telling you you don't need a Bamboo A1 because you've got an A1 at home. Yeah, those guys. Here, Elegoo have found a better market gap. In fact, they've actually found a market gap without all the pretense, misdirection and marketing bullshit, by actually leaning into, and I suppose even being proud of their budget conscious position. What they've delivered here stripped this back sensibly whilst passing a bigger saving onto you. Yeah, they've got some software work to do, and we should absolutely, but kindly, add pressure on them to resolve these things and update these features, and when they do, I'll update the description of this video. But the point is, if you're looking to buy the most powerful 3D printer you can on a budget, this is definitely one I'd recommend over many of the others. Just decide if you want color changing or not, but even if you don't, the automatic loading is still handy. So at the end of the day, you know what this is. Sensible savings without the bullshit. I want to say thanks for watching, with a huge thanks going to our members who are on screen now. They help keep the lights on and generally just encourage me to keep doing what I'm doing, as do you for watching my videos and dropping comments, so please do that if you've had a good time. As always, there are affiliate links in the description if you do decide to pick up this or any printer I review, or even any product. Clicking those links before making a purchase really helps me because I make a commission at no cost to you. Above all, I appreciate you being here, so I'm just going to leave it with, until next time, this guy are sick. Fohammer out.